Hey everybody, we are back with another Perspectives episode. Today I have the fantastic pleasure of working with one of my favorite people here on staff, the adorable Cindy Adams. Cindy, thank you for coming today.
Good morning, Josh.
Morning,
So good to be with you today.
All right, so we were having a little chat about something that Cindy presented to our staff and part of our staff development, which is something fun we've been trying to do because we kind of recognized, hey, we got things to work on. We need a little bit of things working on here. And so you presented what we're going to talk about today. You presented this to the staff, and when you did, I was like, this is great. We need to have everybody at Orchard Hill hear this and hear this content.
Okay, well, that's a pretty big bar.
Right, but I'm hoping lots of people see this and go, oh, that's right, So, what we're going to give you today is a little piece of a communication tool to keep in your toolbox so that Orchard Hill becomes a friendlier, happier, more unified, so that the lobby doesn't become a scary place anymore. Because Cindy, part of your job, and you're really, really good at this, is working the lobby. Tell us why you work the lobby, how you work the lobby, what does that mean?
Well, I love the lobby, and I remember when our family first came to Orchard Hill, it seemed like everyone knew someone, and it was daunting. And so my hope in the role I have, and I've been on staff now for over 15 years, is to help the lobby become like my living room. And it has taken a lot for me to get comfortable walking up to strangers.
Sure.
But in this whole communications thing that we did for our staff, I hope that the training would help both personally and professionally.
Sure.
And so, so my role in the lobby is just to say hello and be a friendly smile.
And from me witnessing what you're doing out there, you have zero fear talking to absolutely anybody that shows up. And what we hope to happen at Orchard Hill is we hope the person, finds it a happy, friendly environment.
Right.
And that's one of our core values, is helping people find and follow Jesus.
Right.
And we know people want to come back to a community where they're known and understood and loved.
Right.
So talking is pretty important, and creating a warm environment.
And I do like to talk.
Yeah, you're good at it. You're good at it. Yeah, glad to hear. So today, all of that to warm up, what we're going to be talking about today is active listening.
Correct.
And so you've written it down here. Tell us what active listening is, and then I want to squish down on a couple points. That's right here. Go right ahead.
So when we were looking at different content to deliver to our staff, one of our team leaders said we need to work on our communication. And so if you think about communication as a whole, there's a lot of layers to it. So when I started to kind of dig into it, I thought, what could we take away that would be able to be presented in 45 minutes, which isn't a lot of time, and applicable to everyone on staff. And so I thought, we all can be better listeners because listening is so much part of the communication process. And so I just started digging into that, and through LinkedIn Learning and some Harvard Business Reviews, I came into active listening. And I always thought that active listening was like, I'm going to put my devices down.
Right.
I'm going to really pay attention
to what's going on. Sure.
And nod my head.
Yeah.
And when I started digging into it, it was a much more active participation, which makes sense because my original definition was very passive.
Sure.
And so in my listening, it's like, how am I really paying attention to what you're saying? And even though I'm listening, having it be more two-way.
Yeah, because I was going to say, your definition of what you have written down here is great. Let's tell people what this is. Active listening is when you not only hear what somebody is saying, but also are attuned to their thoughts and feelings. And these are the three parts that I really like. It turns a conversation into an active, non-competitive, two-way interaction. Yeah, explain those: active, non-competitive, two-way. What do those things mean?
So in active, I'm really I'm being attuned to, say, your body language. One of the things that was interesting to me was you can find any data online you want. but at least 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So me being attuned to your body language helps me understand maybe some feelings that you're having. And so that, to me, was an interesting thing to learn. The non-competitive was interesting because it challenged me to go into a conversation with a blank slate.
Okay.
And because sometimes I don't think well on my feet. So sometimes I'd be like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but then I'm assuming that I know how you're going to finish your sentence.
Okay.
And then I'm going to stop listening because I'm going to start composing my response before you're really done with your thought.
Even giving out all the information that maybe I want to share at that moment to you. Okay.
And so that looks at the competitiveness of it. And so it's like, okay, Cindy, let Josh complete his thought, take in all he has to say, and then pause.
Okay.
To give myself time to think in giving my feedback or my response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I like this last part too, the two-way interaction. Explain more of that because I know some people who are very good at it's like drink from the fire hose when they start to talk. And I also know people who are, what's going on today? Nothing. And they clam up, and you're like, ooh, give me something. What am I going to work with here? How is that two-way important?
The two-way was interesting because I've always admired people who ask really good questions.
Okay.
And on a couple different levels. So if you think about it professionally, continuing to ask questions as to flesh out more. And I can also apply this personally because I have two daughters, and as I've raised them, they're, late 20s, early 30s, but when they were teenagers and you're trying to, get the conversation going, and my husband asks really good questions. He does that for a living in working with clients and customers. Kurt does this really well in being able to say, okay, what I think I hear you say is. Okay. But one of the things I found was the 5 whys. Okay. The root cause, and asking, well, why do you feel this way? And asking for, well, can you give me an example? And having it be more of a two-way discussion.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Do you, as a tool of, if you've got that in your head of, okay, I've just started chatting with somebody, maybe I slightly know them, acquaintances, you put them in that realm, and they're walking into church on Sunday morning, and you see them, are you immediately like, I need to hit them with the 5 whys? Or has this become kind of ingrained enough in you that you're like, let's just see how they're doing today? Like, how do you approach that?
In the lobby, it's much more like, hey, how you doing? It's just good to see you. Yeah. How's your world? Okay. And what I'll often do is if I'm getting into a deeper conversation in the lobby, it's sometimes hard just because of my role to have those deeper conversations. Sure. So often on Sunday afternoon or Monday, I'll circle back with the person if I feel like, okay, let's just commiserate more and just talk more. Whereas if I'm having a work situation or at home and I know that I just want to take it down a level. Yeah. So this is a funny example. My husband and I were on a road trip recently, and Lloyd made a comment. He goes, I'm going to really start eating healthier. I'm going to go all clean eating. Okay. And I eat pretty nutritiously. Sure, I've done that for a long time. Yeah. So instead of just saying, okay, as I'm making my grocery list on my phone, I said, so how do you define clean eating? Let's make sure we're on the same plane here. And so it was an interesting conversation because so why do you feel this is clean eating? So it was but it took time. And sometimes I think because of how fast-paced we can work or our lives are, we might not take that time to have it be a longer conversation. But we were on quite a road trip, so I had time.
Yeah, you had plenty of time. And he was enclosed. He's not going to jump out of the car at 60 miles an hour. But yeah, I like what you said about time to take there. And I think in today's like instant gratification, that, you know, of course you're going to buy this and it's going to show up tomorrow. Of course you get mad when your item is sold out at the grocery store because we are just used to immediate. So what I've sort of seen a little bit in myself, being afraid to talk to people, and as well as maybe I don't know that information, maybe I don't know that person well enough, it's easier for me to shrink back behind my device and make it look like, oh, I can't engage with somebody because I don't want to spend that. I don't know how necessarily to spend that time that it would take to start a good conversation. And I was reading this is 25 years ago. I found this book called by John Locke was the guy's name. I'll get this exactly right here. The Devoicing of Society. Why we don't talk to each other anymore. So he wrote that in 1998.
Wow.
Before texting.
Right.
Before smartphones.
Right.
And his sort of vibe of his book was, look, we've got email, we got pagers. These are all different ways that we have faxes. He was talking about the devoicing. And it wasn't like, oh, I lost my voice and I'm not allowed to talk about my subject anymore. Not that devoicing. That's the figurative devoicing. He was like concerned about the literal, we're losing the skill to be able to have conversations right out to there. So I've seen a little bit of that in myself with the devices, and I also have daughters, and
we're very estrogen heavy.
Right
like
here.
I have two daughters. Josh has three. So you know.
And so I remember asking my oldest daughter recently. I was like, okay, so with the phone, like, can you call them and ask? And I remember being this as a teenager too. I was like, I don't want to call somebody. Like, to make a phone call means I'm intruding in their space. It means I might be interrupting them in what they're doing. I might not be saying the exact perfect thing. It's so much easier to text because they can deal with it on their own time. I can make sure that I'm saying I can now edit my text to make sure I'm saying exactly the right words. I don't want to come across right out to here. So that's I think we've seen an interesting cultural change where people are not. I was at the DMV the other day getting my real ID, sat next to somebody and was like, hey, how you doing? They stood up, looked at their phone and moved 2 seats down away from me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I was like, okay, that's their way of saying, like, I'm not ready to talk. And I was like, yeah.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So I was like, wow, okay, here's proof maybe of this guy's idea 25 years ago that we're going to be losing the ability to engage in conversation.
Well, I just think it's an interesting dynamic because I'm old enough where, you know, I was a parent by the time I got my first mobile device.
Sure, okay.
And I remember being a kid and my mother making me call the 1-800 number at Montgomery Ward's to order like an outfit for school because she wanted to teach me that life skill.
Okay.
And it's interesting. First of all, I do want to. People are so gracious when there are many times when I leave Orchard Hill on a Sunday morning. I'm like, I cannot believe I said that. Like, what a goofball I am. And people are very gracious when you circle back and say, hey, I hope that my comment, people are gracious. Or if I have to step away from a conversation and I'm like, hey, sorry I couldn't finish the conversation. I had to talk to this person. Oh, that's fine.
That's fine.
You know, so people are very empathetic and gracious with that. Yeah. But it's interesting because there are times when you're right. I just need to pick up the phone because it gets confusing in email, it gets confusing in text messages, or it gets so laborious because 15 emails later, it's like, I could have just dealt with it.
Walk over to the person's cube
Right.
and say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what I think is what's
and
happening.
I think as we as a culture have gotten used to technology, have we lost some of those life skills that we haven't taught our kids? It's kind of like cursive writing.
Yeah.
You know, and what I think cursive writing is coming back into the school curriculum just because of like identity.
Where is this? Yeah.
You know,
this
because
is your own
printing.
handwriting.
Yes.
Yeah, this is something you can... in the weird tech thing, I saw something last week where a guy posted online. He's like, I'm not comfortable making a decision without asking ChatGPT.
Oh, interesting.
And it was like, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? He's like, let me ask what is the best restaurant nearby. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not I'm making a value judgment on whether or not you're going to pick the best restaurant in town.
Right.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what's best. You're like, no. Your identity.
Make a decision.
Tell me what you like.
Well, it's interesting. You know, it's interesting. We were talking about the instantaneousness of things. And one of the parts of active listening is giving yourself space to decode and decipher.
Okay.
And there are times when, you know, I love my girls. But, you know, they're used to things being instantaneous like you are. And I love to check things off a list. So I can I can feel their pain, but there are sometimes when we were raising our kids where they'd ask a question, they want the answer now. I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, Dad and I need to be on agreement in this because our decision, you know, like what you're doing on a Saturday night, Dad might have made plans for us as a family.
Something else.
And so this decision has ripple effects. So hold your pants.
Yeah, and let's get everybody on the same page.
And I appreciate that from in our organization because there are times when I'm like, listen, I got things to do. I want to check them off my list.
Boom, boom, boom.
And I appreciate the thoughtfulness to say, no, let's think about this.
Yeah. And that's rare today.
Yeah.
That's becoming more rare because people are, I need to give an answer. I need to get it. And that just, like you're saying, that just creates more confusion when you're like, well, didn't we say this? Well, didn't we say that? Well, this person said this. You got a 7-person text thread going, and you're like, well, who makes the decision? How do we do this?
Right.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, you wanting to be checking off the list.
I love checking off lists. Love a good to-do list.
You presented to us 4 different listening styles.
Right.
So I'm going to tell people what these 4 are.
Okay.
You're going to tell me what each one means and how each one goes around. Okay. So the first one you had listed was a task-oriented listener. Who is that? What do they do?
Okay, so that's me at work. And so I'm Kurt's assistant. And so my role is just to try and make his life easier, to do wear whatever hat is necessary that day. And so I can have when he and I will sit down, I'm like, okay, here are my questions. And so we can be very task oriented, like 5 good minutes. He does the teaching assignments, like, okay, here's this. Who do I need to distribute it to?
Okay.
Organizing baby baptisms and dedications. We got a lot of babies these days. So I'm, working with worship arts and adding another service and that kind of stuff. So that can be very task oriented.
So you're listening, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're listening to him almost like trying to catch raindrops in a bucket, walking around going, oh, this I need to keep, this I need to keep, this I need to keep.
And this is who needs to know this.
Further down the chain.
Yeah, and so it says, focused on efficiency and shapes a conversation around a transfer of information.
Okay, so from person A to you, person B, with the idea that there is a person C that needs to hear what person A has to say, and your job is person B.
Well, and also, I was thinking about this personally. My husband and I Lloyd and I will be talking about a project, and he'll say, we need to do this. And I'm like, okay, who's we? Who's me? Because this we's getting tired. If we want to do this, that's fine.
Okay.
And it was good because,
it defined roles. Yeah.
And it gives clarity, because where there's not clarity, that's when communication can really break down.
Can move around, eat itself up a little bit as to like, oh, I thought you were there.
Right.
That's good. Okay, that made sense. Number 2, second type of listener. the analytical listener.
Okay,
Who is that? What do they do?
So this person aims to analyze a problem from a neutral starting point.
Neutral meaning what?
Well, that's where I think you had a really good example. I wasn't really, like, this to me is hard to differentiate sometimes between task-oriented. But I think you had a really good example.
Yeah, so we were chatting earlier about this. So I'm married to a very analytical person. She does amazing amounts of research on what most people would find trivial and would say like, well, we'll just make a decision. And she is fantastically gifted in being able to say, wait, and let me make sure that all of the things are correct right to here. So we had a funny conversation recently where I was like, okay, what's going on with one of our daughters? What's happening tonight with her? On a weekend night type of a thing.
Right.
And her response back to me was, well, you remember when she had that friend at softball 3 years ago who wore the yellow shirt, whose parents had the blanket,
right?
And I'm sitting there waiting, like, what's the
Just
information?
tell me what to do.
Tell me what to do. Tell me where
Right.
that is. But she's defining. She's letting me know that this is a thought out. She's trying to show care and saying,
sure,
we trust this person that we're going to be
Right.
driving our daughter to the house. She eventually was going to tell me.
There's a lot of background to it.
At 6 o'clock, you're going to drive her to, but she
Right.
didn't just flat want to say, 6
Right.
o'clock, you drive her to her friend's house.
Whereas me, as a task person, I'd be like, this is what you need to do.
Yeah,
there
right
you go.
out to there. So that's I kind of live in that, which she's made some great decisions that I would not have had the patience to stop and say, wait a minute, why should we even pause there?
Sure. And that's where it's good where, as partners, you can, husbands and wives, you can, understand how the different gifts you each bring to the table. And it's like the next is relational listener, seeks to build a connection and understand and respond to emotions and the underlying message. And it's funny because I can be very task-oriented.
Yeah.
And years ago, there was that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus.
Yeah, certainly.
And that was interesting in how it gave me verbiage, because there are times when I just want my husband to listen.
Yeah.
And I will say to my daughters, and this was great when they were especially getting into middle school age, is to like,
Yeah.
do you want me to listen and just build that relationship?
Okay.
Or do you want me to help solve the problem? Because I can be a relational listener.
Yeah.
I just love people. Like, let me just get to know you. Let me just hear who you are. What's your DNA?
Yeah.
And I love that with my children. Or I can help you solve a problem. I'm pretty good at that. So tell me what hat to wear.
Which one in now are you asking me?
Yes.
Which role? Because these roles are not locked in.
Correct.
You want to be able to float between a couple of these roles.
And that's where emotional intelligence can really lean into a kind of, for me to sense the vibe of where the conversation should go.
I remember there was a woman that used to work in children's ministry here with us who was absolutely fantastic at relational listening. And we went into a conversation about Kids Fest and what was going to be going on in Kids Fest. And we talked for 45 minutes on this is what we hope happens. This is where we're excited about right to here.
Right.
These are the really great things we did last year right there. We had fun. We laughed.
Right.
She told funny stories about kids that she was excited about out to there. Right. And I walked away from that meeting going, that was a great meeting. And then I looked down at my paper as to like, what were we supposed to talk about again? We hit none of those things. And I was like, okay, is she going to walk away with the like, oh, that was really great, well-timed spent. We felt better bonded together. I'm excited about what you're going to do. And now I'm excited about what you're going to do. Right. Zero task happened in that conversation.
That's the tension we kind of live in.
Yeah, right to there. And okay, bouncing on. Last one, critical listener. What's this?
It typically judges both the content of the conversation and the speaker themselves. Okay,
when does this happen?
So that's when, so I think there are sometimes I can have this at work just because I like to, not that my opinion matters, but I think, I'm a woman. Like getting ready to say goodbye to my 50s. And I think feedback across the demographics is important. And so I will listen to 5 Good Minutes. I'll listen to most podcasts, probably not this one. But just with a critical ear to say like, okay, where did it land? What could we have done better? Because one of our staff values is make it better. So how can we make it better? And not that my opinion impacts things, but it's good to be heard.
Yeah.
So
and to say, and again, my super analytical wife is really good at this. She's an engineer, and she said she'll go into meetings sometimes, and the whole point of the meeting is shoot holes in my idea so that we know we are putting out a good product.
Sure.
Tell me the things that are wrong. Tell me the things that I'm not thinking about that are going to break down later on where the conflict is going to be.
Well, and also, too, going into the critical listening, that kind of goes into one of the parts of active listening is taking an action plan.
Okay.
Because, like, we as typically here, we will try and do debriefs, whether it's a Christmas debrief, a debrief after an event, a debrief after maybe a seasonal study. We'll come back and say, okay, this is where we saw wins.
Okay.
This is what worked well. This is, okay, didn't know this was going to be coming.
Yeah.
We could have communicated this differently because... Or better, because these are the questions that we got. Did we communicate the door code well?
Sure.
And being a critical listener in those kind of debriefs helps come up with an action plan to say, okay, here are the things we need to do better. And then who's going to own executing?
Who has the responsibility past this? Not just all go, that didn't work. Okay.
Right.
Let's try again next week and maybe it'll happen differently.
Right. Yeah. And so taking that critical listening, and even, we'll be in meetings and having conversations and just say, okay, who needs to know this decision? And who's going to own telling that person this decision? Yeah. It's kind of like, when we land on, we had a Christmas debrief. Okay. We have a draft of what our Christmas 2025 dates could be.
Yeah.
Okay, who's responsible for telling worship arts and communications, hey, these are the penciled in dates that we'll nail down late summer. Right to hear. You know?
Yeah. So what does that, bouncing back to how maybe our viewers and listeners today can use this type of active listening, what are some proactive steps maybe that people should try if they're not comfortable with kind of these concepts and these are sort of unfamiliar to them?
I think giving yourself the space to, giving yourself the space in our culture to say, you know what, can I call you back when I have more time and mental space?
Sure.
My daughter, one of my daughters called me the other day, and of course, when your 29-year-old daughter calls, you're probably going to pick up the phone. Just to say hello and hear her voice.
Are you still alive? What's going on?
No, because it's just as your kids get older and they're not in your home, you're like, oh, they still love me.
This is and I'm still acknowledged as a human.
And I could tell by her voice she wanted to have it was going to be a long conversation. And I was just like, you know what, honey, I'm in the middle of something here. I'm at work. Can I call you later on tonight when I have more time?
Yeah, bandwidth available and emotionally ready to respond.
Because in our culture, we want to have that conversation now, and I just wanted to be present in that conversation.
Which is a weird thing that I've seen recently in television ads of the AI of Gemini on the Google phone, where their advertisement is like, you're an alone person and I'm just supposed to talk to this device, and you have a conversation with the computer. You're like, what? Okay, what are we doing as a world where we're saying I'm purchasing an electronic friend, instead of intentionally relating with humans. And what we hope is part of what Orchard Hill is a place where people find community, where they are known and loved. So it's a weird time.
I think that's a great another podcast, because you think about the whole dynamics of that.
Yeah.
And where that is, and because people are doing that.
Yeah.
And so
in the commercial, there's a guy under his truck. Which oil? What thing am I looking for? What millimeter wrench do I need? Right? He's talking to the computer.
Okay,
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
But at church, there's probably 4 or 5 mechanic guys who are really great at this, who would be more than happy to chat. How do you find those people?
Right,
And when you say, this is my answer, that then stops relationships.
Sure.
And cuts that off. So that was a weird little thing I've seen recently of like,
it's a fine line.
Yeah. Is this helpful? Of course. Yeah, when I'm fixing my car, of course I want that information right there. I'm out in the cold with the hood open, and I'm stuck on the side of the road, and what is leaking where? What do I look for? Where do I?
Right.
Yeah. Trick as to when to properly use which tool.
Right.
Type of thing. Yeah. All right. So going through, I wanted to chat a little bit about this because I've been exactly what you said. I've received this from you well. And I don't know that people do this well. How do you end a conversation? When you're emotionally done, maybe, when you have to get to something else, how do you gently, and maybe you've already said a little bit of this, but how do you gently, kindly, lovingly say, I need to stop talking to you right now? Because that feels a little abrupt.
Well, a lot of it depends on the context. Like the example I gave with my daughter and at home. And sometimes it's just like, I know my husband, he'll have conference calls. He'll have, I'm running to work out. Yeah. And it's just like, I have to go right now, but can we continue this conversation? Because again, people are gracious. Yeah. If they know your heart and you're not being just flippant and rude, to say, you know what, I have to go. Open. And so like if I'm in the lobby and because of my role, someone on staff might want to talk to me, someone who I've asked to meet me is kind of standing off to the side and I can see them in my periphery. I'll be like, you know what? I need to go right now. Yeah. How about we touch base later in the week?
Later, fine. I'll find you Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, and just being able to circle around because they can kind of read the room too. Yeah. And so I try to be gracious in that. And there are some times if I feel in my gut that maybe I ended the conversation too quickly or too abruptly, I'll circle back and text them and say, hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we missed on this.
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to go real quickly, but I had asked this person to meet me about baby baptisms, so I hope you forgive me. Yeah. Let's touch base in the lobby on Sunday. So just being gracious and acknowledging that you have to go and that it's not ideal, but that's my reality.
Yeah, of what's there.
Yeah.
Of which your reality is quickly approaching us right now.
Yes.
So we're going to have to end this conversation, but if you want to practice your active listening skills, maybe with some of the things you've heard here, and look it up, Cindy's going to be in the lobby almost every weekend.
Look for me in the lobby.
Happy to chat. And I need a lot more practice, so she can even be that A to B to C, bouncing you over to B.
That's really funny.
If you live through that experience, let us know, and we will try to treat you with love and kindness as we meet and greet each other. All right, so thanks, Cindy, for being here and making this happen.
Thanks, Josh. You always make this easy.
Thank you. So you guys out there, there's plenty more Orchard Hill Plus material on the app. I like when they said, wherever good books are sold, wherever good podcasts are delivered, download it. Yeah, that's where we find Orchard Hill Plus stuff. So thanks for being with us today. We will catch you later.
Bye.